I'm not sure whether. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We just came back from the announcement of our 26 to 2027 budget in Parliament, and thank you for this opportunity, especially the media. And as you must have heard, that the theme of our budget is a responsible budget for sustainable development. And the focus, if you listen through the speeches this morning, the focuses of the budget is to look at ourselves, understand where we are, and then look for strategies and action plan, or to answer the question on so what questions, what strategies and action plans we're going to put in place. So we already announced a lot of strategies and plans that we put into place in this budget. The focus is for us to strengthen our fiscal position, and that is to look at both expenditures and revenue as well. There will be a lot of work that needs to be done with our target of stabilizing our fiscal position, and from the fiscal position, then we're looking at growing the economy. So, from a strong fiscal position that we intend to put into place, that will really assist the government as well as the private sector especially, and the people, to see that our economy grows into the future. And apart from strengthening of fiscal position, we're looking at some strategies like investments. I talked a lot about capital expenditures this morning. They'll be one of the focus going forward. Investment by government, as well as encourage investments by the private sector. And with that, we're providing some incentives as well that goes with it. And another theme that you can get from the budget announcement is for productivity, and that is across the civil service as well as our employees. Yeah? And the current where we are at the moment is a difficult situation for us, because we're still facing the fuel crisis. We're not sure when the fuel crisis will end, and from that background, we hope and also have faith that we will go through the fuel crisis, because we can see that the price of fuel obviously is reducing, and hopefully FCCC will announce reduce fuel prices come the 1st of July. Yeah? So that's probably general in a nutshell what I announced this morning. The assistance to our people, to our business continues, and that will assist or probably jumpstart the economy for growth. So that's generally my comments this morning on the overall budget theme. Then we have our team here who can provide some comments as well. And then if there's any question, our team are here as well to support. say something?
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister and members of the media. I think as the Minister said, this budget was a very complex and challenging one, given the context of the budget with a complex global situation, which is still very volatile and unsettled and is still evolving. And also on the domestic front, if you hear what the Minister said on the fiscal situation, it remains challenging with the imbalances on the fiscal front, and on the economy with the fuel crisis induced economic slowdown and some of the challenges within the socio-economic environment. This budget was crafted. The theme of the budget, which is a responsible budget for a sustainable future, responsible for three reasons. One, the government has tried to restrain the expenditure levels at the current level of around $4.8 billion, similar to the current budget, and we are doing that by we are maintaining the expenditures within $4.8 billion, even though we are accommodating more than $200 million additional expenditures for the various capital projects that were announced, including the investments in the health sector, the construction of the new Cancer Hospital in CWM, the various upgrades of the primary healthcare facilities, the announcement on the replacement of the 4 critical major bridges, the upgrade of the Kinoya wastewater plant and various other capital expenditure programs, and also the funding for the elections, referendum and the census, which alone is around $70 million. Despite that, we are containing expenditures at $4.8 billion, and given that prices are increasing, if you adjust the government's expenditure on real-term basis, which is adjusting for these prices and these additional expenditures that were catered, we are in fact reducing the real expenditures of government. Where is it coming from? The government has reduced its operational expenditure by 10% across the board for all agencies and ministries. We are cutting all the vacant positions across the government, and hiring will be only based on essential services and specialized services. So the salary reduction for the ministers continue. Also the tightening that we did for expenditure on vehicle use and other operating expenditures of government continues. For all the state entities that receive government grant, we are also providing a 10% cut across the board. So we're maintaining expenditure at this level, not increasing it, and even accommodating for this. Secondly, I think we took a very conscious decision that given the challenges in the economy and the global situation, challenges with the cost of living, challenges with the fuel crisis, we are maintaining the spending on the social sector. And the minister highlighted some of that. We are not cutting the civil service salaries. We are maintaining the social welfare payments that's being made. Given the increases that we had in the last 2 years, we are maintaining the scholarship budget, maintaining back to school, and all other subsidies and temporary measures that were introduced to support our people, households, and businesses from the fuel crisis. And thirdly, responsible in the sense, if you see, we are trying to pivot away from operating expenditures to capital expenditure, and the pipeline of projects for the next 3 to 4 years is, we have committed to almost $2 billion in capital expenditure, which basically means in the years to come, the capital spending of government is going to only increase, because these projects is going to commence in the next financial year, and it's going to pick up momentum. So all in all, I think given the situation that we have domestically and also the global environment, we've tried to delicately balance the competing priorities to make sure that we keep our fiscal situation stable and protected. We try to balance the need to support the economy and those that are vulnerable, including the households and our people. And overall, there's a huge focus being placed by government to grow the economy, supported by the spending in capital expenditure, supported by the massive capital investment projects that we're going to do with various state entities like Energy Fiji Limited, Fiji Ports Corporation, Airports Fiji Limited, and also supporting the many private sector investments that's in the pipeline. And overall, on the tax side of things, we have kept generally the tax regime stable, because at a time like this, it's not right to increase taxes. And also, given the fiscal challenges, we have a lot of challenges in terms of reducing the taxes. So generally, the taxes are kept unchanged. However, there's a number of tax incentives that's been announced to support investment, whether it's investment in the cement factory, whether it's for mahogany value addition, or whether it's investment in gas and fuel storage. Thank you.
Bola Vinakasa, Litya Dava from FPC. Congratulations to you and your team for the budget delivery. My question is just a basic one. This is in terms of whether this budget improves what an employee takes home or just help them cope with the rising costs. And the next one is, even though the PS mentioned that expenditure and spending for government has been reduced, but somehow, in some areas it's still high, but growth revenue is still uncertain. So what is covering that gap?
Thank you. If you've heard that we've maintained salary level among civil servants, and on top of that, we're providing a lot of assistance, especially for those earning $30,000 and less. So we don't expect them to be worse off. We expect them to continue with the same level of state of living they're currently living in, and don't expect any cut. But with the assistance that's already there, we don't expect them to be worse off.
So in terms of the support for the people, I think at a time like this, when your revenues are under pressure and it's declining by $200 million, when there's uncertainty on what's going to happen globally, government has taken a decision not to cut salaries. There would, as you can see from the financial numbers, the fiscal deficit has been kept at 7% of GDP, which is almost $1 billion. And it was a decision that was taken consciously to maintain expenditure at $4.8 billion. Because if we want to reduce expenditures, as the minister said, government will have to take some tough decisions on the size of the civil service, in terms of the salaries, in terms of the spending in the social sector. But government took a conscious decision not to reduce any of the funding, whether it's for the payment of salaries within the government for the civil servants and the public sector, whether it's provision of all the other income support measures like social welfare payments, the subsidies that we provide in terms of free water, subsidized electricity, the bus fare subsidy that's provided. This is all maintained. In terms of the deficit, or your question on the funding, yes, it's a relatively very large deficit of $1 billion. However, as I said, at a time when your revenues is coming down, and if you want to maintain your expenditures and still accommodate all these capital expenditures that has been announced, there's no other way but to borrow. And I think at a time of a crisis like this, when there's all these uncertainties and people are impacted, government took a decision that we will maintain the deficit at 7%. Had revenues not come down by $200 million, had the economy not been impacted by the fuel crisis, our deficit would have been, based on the current expenditure numbers, lower than 5%. Deficit would have been much lower. And as soon as the economy picks up, these numbers will reverse. And this is the budget presented based on the revenue assumptions now. If assume the situation improves in the next few months, if revenues overperform, we don't have to borrow $1 billion. And this is based on a worst case situation that revenues will decline, and to maintain this expenditure, government will have to borrow $1 billion. However, if in the next few months things improve, revenues perform better than it is, that means if assume what we expected earlier, if revenues are $200, $300 million higher, deficit will eventually end at below around 4%. But however, it's as the global situation is unfolding, it's still evolving. We don't know what can happen tomorrow. We thought to keep this big fiscal flexibility in terms of borrowing. However, we'll monitor this closely, and if things deteriorate or if things improve, some of these things can be changed. I think I'll leave it there.
So speaking of a worst case scenario, sir, $1 billion in borrowing, is it going to be local or foreign borrowing? Also, how is it going to be used for capital expansion or to run the civil service?
So most of the borrowing, all borrowings on the capital project is loan finance from the Asian Development Bank, World Bank, IIFP, JICA and others. And in terms of the borrowing mix, given that we have a deficit of $1 billion, we will borrow around $1.4 billion in this upcoming financial year, $1 billion for the deficit financing, and around $440 million for the payment of principal debt. Of that, around $600 million or so will come from external sources, and the remainder from domestic financing from FNPF. But all of these borrowed funds would be channeled for capital projects. And in terms of the financing, I mean, as I said, one of the reasons we were confident enough to maintain a higher deficit, because there's a huge borrowing requirement, is we have already secured the financing that was supposed to be accessed in the current financial year. If you look at the current financial year, the deficit is slightly lower than what we expected. So the saving that we have in this financial year, including all the funds that has been arranged from the external partners and IDB, World Bank, all of these partners recognizing the challenges on the fiscal front, they've all increased their financing. For example, we were working with the IDB on a US $100 million loan facility. In light of the crisis, they have increased it to US $150 million. Asian Development Bank, we were working on a US $100 million loan financing. They have increased it to $200 million. This basically shows that the development partners understand the situation and they're increasing the financing, knowing that these funds are needed at this point in time. However, I think very clearly, as the Minister said, moving forward, we cannot sustain this level of deficit, and there'll be government will have to take tough actions moving forward to reduce the deficit to below 3%. However, for now, given that we are in a crisis, we have to maintain, or the government decided to maintain the deficit at 7%. And most of this, if you see, is on capital projects moving forward.
Yeah, Dionysia from Fiji Times. Just in recognition, I mean, the government has recognized the challenges ahead in terms of formulating future budgets in Chapter 4 of its supplement. So how does this budget set the pace for that journey towards budget consolidation?
I think we've partly answered the question. First is the capital expenditures that we'll intend to activate from this financial year. There's a lot, and some of which were coming from this financial year and build up to the next financial year. A lot of capital expenditures which I announced, apart from encouraging investments. We have a big pipeline of investments that are there, and especially from the private sector. That is another area. And another area that I've already mentioned is the productivity, on the productivity side of our civil servants. There's some reviews and reforms which are currently being done. All of those, including encouraging women as well, all those will add to the improvement in how we do business and also improve the activation of projects on the ground that will lead to a lot of investment activity to enhance our growth going forward.
Yes, that the social cost of maintaining social obligations by government is a big cost for government to bear, and that there'll be, serious need to review these allocations to these freebies, that as he called it. So, what is that now? The work in progress for reorganizing that cost.
So if you see, we took this opportunity to create a bit of awareness on where government is spending, and as for the nation to come together and rethink about public sector spending. Oh, and that's why in the budget speech, Honorable Minister talked about the fiscal developments in the last 10 years. And as a country, now we are spending $2 billion in the social sector, which is education, scholarships, health, social welfare, back to school, spending in the social sector. 1 billion of that is salaries for example, their teachers and doctors. But apart from that, $1 billion is on these other things. This is on over 40% of the budget. So you're spending 40% of the budget on the social sector, and you're spending $2.3 billion to sustain the civil service and the public sector salaries and operations, which means the country has been deprived of capital investments, which is building more roads, bridges, wastewater, drainage, waste management, and other infrastructure. However, moving forward as a country, we need a dialogue on how do we approach this this mix of expenditure. Because if we want to spend more on capital, which is the focus for the future, if we have to grow the economy and if we have to give long-term benefits to our people, we need to relook at this whole spending and reprioritize spending on social sector. And I think Honorable Minister brought that clarity in Parliament today, and is something for all of us to think about.
It seems like something that will happen in the future, but right now our people are struggling. Based on that, social welfare payments had increased by 50%. That's supposed to end at the end of this month. Is that 50% increment going to continue in the next financial year? Also, what happens to the GP scheme as the 1% levy that was being used to finance this GP scheme, and how much money has been accumulated, as you said, Mr. Kalner, through the 1% levy for the GP scheme?
Just on the GP scheme, the recalibration that we have done is 0.5% will now go for training, and there's a 0.1% that will go for public sector training through the government's training school FLIPS. So 0.6% is now set aside for training. 0.4% will be for accident compensation. Prior to this, 0.5% was for the GP scheme. So we have removed that 0.5. However, the GP scheme still continues because there's a funding that we have accumulated over the last few years, which is around $10 million, and which can easily cater for us for the next at least 2 years. In the interim, government will basically have to make a decision, where do we get more money to fund the GP scheme, and that can easily be funded from the national budget moving forward after 2 years once this is depleted. Or government can think about streamlining it, but that's something. So this just to clarify, the GP scheme is not going away. The GP scheme is still there. It will be funded from the balance that we have in the trust fund. However, the 0.5% from the NTPC levy that was going towards the GP scheme has been removed.
How much is it there?
Around 10 million.
So, apart from capital expenditures,
Industry induced levy that was brought up by the industry itself. Right? They are aware that Fiji Airways needs assistance, and Fiji Airways is the one that brings most of probably over 70% of the visitors. So they all agreed to that 5%, and it will be a temporary measure for 12 months, and then we'll review later on. And it's basically because they are aware that Fiji Airways is doing a lot of heavy lifting for most of them.
So I think just to add on to what the minister said, Fiji Airways uses around $500 million of fuel to run its operations and brings most of the tourists into Fiji. When the fuel prices have doubled, aviation pricing doubled for Fiji Airways, in a 12-month period they'll have to spend $1 billion. Fiji Airways have to take two decisions. Either they pass the full cost of the price increase on the passengers, which is the visitors that's coming on the airfares, which can affect the cost, which will affect the cost of the airfares and can have a drastic impact on the visitor arrivals. Or they can take a decision as an entity to reduce the number of flights. However, if Fiji Airways reduces its flight, or if there's any impact on the number of visitors, everybody in the tourism industry gets affected. We had a lot of discussions with the tourism industry, which is all the hotels and the airline and the other stakeholders on how to support Fiji Airways. I think there's general consensus amongst the industry and the government that Fiji Airways has to be supported, because without Fiji Airways, there's no tourism industry. So the industry agreed that there'll be a 5% tax on all the hotels and tour operators and cruise operators, and all that funding would be given to Fiji Airways to make sure that they continue all their flights as normal to get in the tourists. There was also agreement within the industry, as the minister said, given that Fiji Airways has been doing the heavy lifting, and if you look at the room rates, the cost of the services provided by the hotel is relatively high. Most of them, they have agreed that they will not increase the prices, but will basically absorb the 5%. So that was the understanding, which is basically we're not passing additional cost to the visitors, because most of the hotels, tour operators and the cruise operators, they will absorb the 5%, and all that funding will be for Fiji Airways. If we don't do this, the impact on the hoteliers will be far more, and I think the industry understands that. And maybe you can get comments from them too.
On the cabinet size, is there any plans to reduce it? Also looking at the parliamentary seating, most of parliamentary sittings are getting allowances on that sitting and also travel allowance. Is the ministry looking at to reduce this anytime soon?
Sorry, for the cabinet size, we expect that to remain until after the election, because we are aware that the election will happen very soon. And for the other committees, they will continue to operate. There's a dire need for them because of the number of bills and regulations that are still outstanding that needs to be done, apart from the Constitution and the referendum. So we expect those to continue.
So, Prama from Fiji One News. Critics have mentioned, many critics have mentioned that this budget is fiscally responsible, but it also does not go up to easing the financial pressure on households. What do you say to the many Fijians that were hoping for direct relief from the rising cost of living?
So what they're saying there is whatever they're receiving is probably not sufficient. But what we're telling them is this is a difficult time, crisis time, and we already provided the best that we can from the support that we provided. The only thing that we probably didn't provide is any salary increment to cater for the increases. But on the flip side, we expect the fuel prices to reduce, that is just from next week. So that will ease the burden a lot for those people already receiving assistance.
Regarding the reducing fuel price, and the exact date you mentioned next week, but any exact date?
On the first of July is first of the month is normally the date that fuel prices.
Tax holidays are granted to companies like Fiji Water. These are multi-million dollar companies who make a lot of revenue. Shouldn't government tax them? You mentioned in your delivery budget on tax holiday granted to companies. What about Fiji Water? These are multi-million companies. Should they be granted tax on?
They already have some concessions already, and they're paying probably the correct or probably a correct level, whether it's tax or direct or indirect tax, but they're paying to government.
So just on that question, they have a water resource tax, so they pay probably a lot more than they would pay were they paying income taxes. So they're paying for every litre of water they extract.
How much?
In excess of $100 million. So, and just to Parama's question around what the ordinary Fijian, should expect in regard to some of those austerity measures in the wake of the fuel crisis and issues we've got globally, what the government has done is they've maintained the VAT exemption on the 22 items. So that is going, ensuring that we actually stay stable in terms of that. Also, the government is subsidising EFL and also bus fares, so that those organisations, the utility companies and the bus companies, do not increase their fares. So again, it's an austerity measure to ensure that the take-home pay remains the same. Also, the exemption in terms of threshold for PAYE has remained the same. Anyone that earns below $30,000 is not going to be taxed. So again, trying to ensure that there's stability moving forward.
Is FRCS on track to collect taxed revenue for the company?
So in terms of the collections this year, we're on target. In fact, we're above forecast. We will end this year potentially between $50 to $100 million above forecast. And again, some of that is to do with the groundswell in economic activity and collection as well. So we have put in place quite a lot of collection measures. We will continue to accelerate those collection measures in the new financial year. So we will be looking right across the board in terms of the asset declarations, in terms of cross-border jurisdictions. We're also looking at international taxations in terms of raising the standards for multinationals as well. So there's a whole host of initiatives that will go towards collections in the future.
So just my question on tax compliance. There has been issues with people allegedly owing upwards of $20 million and leaving the country. What's being done to improve tax compliance, and how much do you believe is owed in unpaid taxes through these alleged defrauders?
There's a black economy in Fiji, which we call the shadow economy. So we're always working to try and flush these people out and bring them into the net, so to speak, and to make them comply. There has been a case that you talked about. That is, we're actually working with a number of agencies in terms of ensuring that the assets of those organisations are under scrutiny, and certainly we are working with their lawyers and their advisors in terms of ensuring that they are brought to justice, or certainly that they get a fair hearing in a court of law.
Minister, has the government budgeted for the possibility that the fuel crisis could get worse?
Sorry, what's the question again?
Has the government budgeted for the possibility of the fuel crisis worsening in the future rather than improving?
we've taken into account that the current crisis will continue. If the positive happens, that will be a gain for us.
So just to add on to what Minister said, we've prepared this budget on a worst case scenario, which is what I was trying to explain on the deficit, which means given what we are, if this crisis continues and the economic downturn continues, we will end up with $1 billion deficit with a 7%. However, if things start improving and if the economy grows, tax collections grows, this will be much better, which will means we'll have to borrow less. But at this point in time, given that we're just starting the financial year, it makes sense for us to assume a worst case scenario.
Through the budget delivery today, there's a certain more investment in certain projects that the government is investing in. Let's say the housing programs and other investments in projects. How will government ensure that the implementation of this announced project? Now we look at the side of Lotok pool, which is there for, years, hasn't been completed. Now we have these new double up projects that are coming up and money has been invested in it. How will government ensure that this project, goes forth, the implementation part? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to say that the Ministry of Finance is actively involved with the Ministry of Strategic Planning in terms of monitoring those projects, especially the large ones. And with the help of our multilateral partners. So they are the ones who have been pushing us. Probably we've been slow the last 3.5 years, but the last 1 year, you can see that there's some pressure on ensuring that some of those projects do come online. And together with, I think as I announced today, there's a there's a cabinet committee, the cabinet chosen subcommittee that will do the follow-ups and ensure that projects do activated.
So just on the capital projects, if you look at the capital budget this year, there's a additional $100 million for these new projects. But the value of these projects over the next 4 or 5 years is $2 billion, which means that the spending will ramp up in the upcoming years. Implementing capital expenditures is a challenge. And what we have learned from the past, that's why a lot of effort has been invested in properly designing these projects. These are all the projects that were announced is backed by Asian Development Bank, World Bank and other multilaterals. And a lot of effort has been put to make sure that when we kickstart this project, the implementation is quick. And to address the capacity issues in terms of implementation, for example, on the water project, the Asian Development Bank is providing a grant of $10 million to set up a school, because at the same time we need capacity to get these projects done. So because these are projects backed by multilaterals, there's a lot of technical support behind the scene that's being provided to implement these projects. And that's why we are being realistic. And in this budget, there's $100 million of these projects that's budgeted. However, that's going to ramp up as we improve capacity to get these projects done.
Back to my question on the seating allowance and travel allowance. Is it going to be reduced? Yes or no?
Remain the same for the time being. Yeah.
There's a lot of attention being given to Fiji Airways through the 5% increase in tax and a $200 million government guarantee and other concessions. For Fiji Airways, is it in trouble or is everything okay with Fiji Airways?
Yes, so this is a unusual situation where the fuel price has doubled for Fiji Airways. And the major operating cost for Fiji Airways is fuel. And at a time when the fuel price has doubled every airline, not only in Fiji, but everywhere in the world, is going through the same challenge. So as I said, as the entity, Fiji Airways can take a decision, reduce its flights and manage its fuel cost. But we can't afford this as a country. That's why the industry has come on board to say they'll absorb that 5% tax and give that money. Government is putting its share. We are providing a $200 million guarantee. All other stakeholders, Airports Fiji Limited, ITS, CAF, FRCS, Ministry of Finance, all the fees that FRCS pays, we are providing a relief. There's other discussions that's happening with Fiji Airways, including FNPF and FDB and Ministry of Finance, to ensure that the airline is supported during this time. Once the fuel price comes down, that issue is no longer there. So this is because induced by the fuel price increase.
The jet fuel prices is very high. What if it keeps continuous? Like, what's the time cutoff for how much you can have before it really is a big problem with the TLs? In terms of its ability to operate.
So, I mean, given that this is such a critical strategic asset for the country, there's been a lot of thinking and discussions happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of other options that's being discussed. However, maybe that's something that we can discuss when we reach there. But there's a lot of other options that's being discussed if this crisis continues for Fiji Airways.
So, the price monitoring and enforcement task force, how effective have they been since the task force was announced? Also, my question on the social welfare recipients, the 50% increase hasn't been answered.
Just answer the social welfare, and Minister can get on the prices. The additional, at the moment we spend around over $200 million to provide social welfare support to 130,000 people. When we had the fuel crisis, the fuel price increased, the government took a decision that we will provide additional 50% across the board for all social welfare recipients, which was effective from May, June and July, for 3 months. For 3 months, that's an additional cost of $24 million for government. Now, moving forward, in the budget, if you see, we've announced that this will end in July. Why? As the Minister said, we expect FCCC to make some major announcements in the next few days on a major price reduction, which will get effective from 1st of July. And at the same time, we're discontinuing the additional 50%. What they used to get, which was a 25% increase in the previous budget and the 5% increase, that all continues. However, if in the situation, if things deteriorate on the fuel price, that's something that government can relook at. So this is based on the anticipation that there will be a fuel price reduction. At the same time, we are continuing with fully absorbing the bus fare increase of 22%, which is costing government around $30 million for all the students, including adults, and the social welfare recipients. So we will continue that. We will continue the subsidies to absorb the full 5.91 cents electricity tariff surcharge that was imposed by FCCC on EFL for all households below 30,000 and also MSMEs below 30,000. That's another $14 million. And some of the diesel concessions to EFL and other entities that depend on fuel, that all continues. However, I think as government, given the limited fiscal space and the challenging fiscal situation, we have been more targeted in terms of how we provide the support in terms of this crisis.
Sorry, on the facilitation,
On the price monitoring,
yeah.
effective have they been considering that people are still struggling and retailers are quick to increase the price, but we hardly see any increases.
Okay, so the committee is functioning, including our team, FRCS, FCCC, and fortunately we have the chairman of the committees here. However, they need some strengthening in terms of funding, as well as some changes to the regulation. So that's what we're doing in this budget. We provide a budget for them to ensure that they do this regularly, plus have the power as well to carry out any any intervention needed.
What's the update on their performance in the last, well, in this financial year?
I think the last meeting reports I saw that they did well, but however, as I mentioned, few areas that they probably need additional power on it.
So just to add on, so the price monitoring task force is basically monitoring the prices, and if you see all the price changes that's happening in the last many months is driven by price changes overseas, whether it's price increase in the price of food, increase in the price of fuel, fertilizer. It's basically driven externally. What the objective of the task force that was set was to monitor these prices and basically provide policy advice to government in the event if there's items where we feel that prices are being increased unreasonably. The committee can recommend to FCCC to introduce price controls. There are a number of local manufacturers and companies that are provided a lot of tariff protection by government. The committee basically monitors the prices for those industries that are protected, and if there's unreasonable increase in prices, the committee recommends to government to price control or either relook at the protection. If you look at some of the details in this budget, we are reducing some of those protection for some of the entities. So they can't basically go out and control prices, one, because this is induced outside, but the objective was to advise government on tariff protections and price control, and that's why FCCC is part of the committee.
My question, I had asked on, apart from capital expenditures, what other parts of today's budget is dependent on money Fiji has not yet done? And the Minister, sir, with relation to allocations, apart from the allocation for election, we also have one for referendum and also on the Constitutional Review Commission. The government had decided to postpone the local government election because we were not financially stable. So, what does this arrangement say? Will it go together? Why did cabinet decide this also in other important ways for cabinet? The local government election is also a promise of the coalition government.
So in terms of priority, the local government has been in terms of the next financial year has been probably put to the lower priorities compared to the referendum and the national elections. And the funds can be reallocated again if there's a need, but that will be in the next financial year.
Just on the issue of what we've budgeted for that's not end, it's only the capital projects. Some of the bigger capital projects that's been announced are multi-year projects, which means when we start the project, it takes 4 to 5 years to get these projects completed. However, we have to make sure that the full financing is available for the project before we commence on major projects. So if you look at all the big projects in the water and wastewater sector, the roads and bridges project, for the health project, these are all finances that have been secured, which the minister highlighted. $1.5 billion has been secured and is going to spend in the next 4 to 5 years. It's on capital projects. However, when we prepare the budget in the following years, we'll also have revenues that will form part of the budget. So these are loan-funded projects, multi-year projects that government has announced and committed now. What this simply means is, moving forward, the capital spending of government is going to increase, and that's why if you see the build-up in the speech today, we try to explain why we need more spending on capital projects, because we need to grow the productive capacity of the economy. We need to grow the economy much faster than what is currently growing at, and to do that, we need to invest in these major capital projects, and we have to do this from some of the loans. It's just to set the stage for the future, which means over time, again the minister highlighted that we need to cap the operating spending at the current levels. If you look at this year, operating spending is basically same as last year, even after accommodating for elections, referendum and other expenditure which is operating in nature. So over time, even if we kept it at nominal levels and don't increase it further, we are on the right track. So in terms of what we have spent that we have not earned is this loan funded capital projects.
Is there a possibility which you will have to borrow more because of government expenditures, considering the salaries and so forth, because it exhausts much of the government revenue?
No. So generally we don't borrow for operating purposes. Most of the borrowing or all of the borrowing is for capital purposes, except in crisis time. So during the COVID pandemic, borrowing was much more than the capital expenditure, which technically means we borrow for operations. And similarly, in this budget, is slightly bigger deficit. But as we said, we are yet to see the next 12 months, and I think we'll have a much better picture at the end of the financial year, whether the deficit is 7% or much lower if things start improving. And as we said, things are looking positive globally with the peace deal between US and Iran, and some of the developments and some of the information that we have or we're expecting, things can be much better and deficit will be much lower. So we'll ultimately end up spending only for capital expenditure. However, because this is very uncertain, we don't know what's going to happen even tomorrow with this global situation.
Hasn't the government increased the tax on cigarettes and liquor this time when we need it?
Yes. Again, there's a big contribution being made from that part of the economy. There's potentially about $300 million coming from that sector. And again, we chose to basically hold the increase of taxes across the board. And as you will note, the core taxes, income taxes, VAT, and all the other taxes have not been increased. And again, this is to provide stability and certainty to consumers and to investors and to our businesses.
Like environment, like carbon. There's a lot of people spending on that. Why didn't you introduce a tax on that? Some kind of apart from cigarettes and alcohol.
Agriculture is again a sector that the government is wanting to stimulate for a long period of time, and there's a incentive there that everything up to $500,000 is not taxable. So, and a lot of our mainstay provincial community rely on kava to actually boost that part of the local economy. It's not something that has been discussed as yet, certainly not at government level.
This is from me is the sovereign wealth fund plan that was announced today, or intention to set up that. Is that very early or is it progressing? Talks progressing? What stage is it?
Yeah, we're still exploring it too early, even though it's been discussed at Parliament, at cabinet level, and there is some positiveness that comes from it, but still early.
This is what's being done to improve that, because Fiji still rates quite poorly internationally.
Sorry, what's the question again?
What's being done to improve ease of doing business, because the country still rates quite poorly internationally.
Yes, I think I announced that today as well. We have some currently we are doing what we can. However, there's some regulatory issues that we are trying to overcome. Some of those legal probably legal changes that need to be done, that's slowing the process. Yeah? After that's been done, hopefully in this month, then we can see that especially in the digitalization of approval processes, that will that will come in. I announced that today as well, with assistance from the Ministry of Communication, who's spearheading that. And apart from that, there's now two committees, the investment committees. One is the Cabinet Subcommittee, and the other is by the civil servants, the permanent secretaries. They're looking at the roadblocks to try and fasten approvals and the investments as well. Apart from the legal slowness or legal issues that we have.
So, last one. I noticed that you were very emotional at the end of your speech in Parliament today. What was going through your mind when you were ending your speech in terms of, you will this being your first budget and against the backdrop of a very challenging economic situation here in the world?
Yes, towards the end, because going back to the theme of our budget, to ensure that we grow, and before that, before going to the growth stage, we have to understand ourselves, prepare ourselves, understand ourselves that we have to share the current burden, share the difficulties. We can't satisfy everyone, and that is how we can grow. Some people will continue to complain. Complain for more assistance. There's some who are genuinely okay with what's provided. So we just stay in the middle to provide some comfort that we're doing what we can to ensure that we grow in the future.
What's being done to support the agricultural communities? For instance, kava, ginger, dalo, and turmeric. These are quite can be good earners for the country, but nothing has been it's being done to expand that.
You can see the budget. I announced it today as well. Before we used to provide a lot of support to the sugar industry. Now most of the some of those assistance are going to those sectors, and not only for farming, but down to value adding, processing, down to marketing as well. True. So, but now, as you go forward, bulk of, or probably not bulk, but a good percentage of the budget will go towards those alternative crops.
The sugar industry has been allocated an increased budget of about $96.3 billion. The revenue from sugar in the last financial year was $75 billion. There's a gap there. So my question is, why is the government still financing the sugar? Tough question. Why is the government still financing the sugar industry? And if it continues to finance, what can be done to increase the revenue from sugar?
Okay. Yeah, the big difference is the sugar price support that we are committing for this financial year because of the reduced sugar price. And we will continue to support the sugar industry if people are still involved or dependent on the sugar industry. So we have farmers and we have those who rely on the sugar industry, like the manufacturers, the welders, the plumbers, and apart from the workers in the sugar factory, and we have the lorry providers, lorry drivers, and all those. If the people are still involved, we will continue to support them. However, going forward, as we are aware, we have a committee that's supposed to look after the sugar industry. We'll ensure that going forward to see that some active actions or even decisions are made on how to progress the sugar industry.
Questions are also being asked that the report of the subcommittee was supposed to be delivered in November last year. That's quite a delay until now. What's the delay for? When can we expect a report on the sugar question?
Yes, because it's a parliament committee. The problem was to ensure that the parliament committee do meet. The problem is they couldn't be able to meet. So the plan is to have that main committee, and then you have a subcommittee that does the work, or the working committee, and that will involve some ministers as well as some senior civil servants.
So the plastic items, tableware and kitchenware, the duty has been reduced from 32% to 15%. The country has an issue with littering. Is this being done to appease the tourism industry? Why is it being reduced?
Again, it's just to provide choice to consumers. But talking about plastics, do you want to just talk about why we actually put it into plastics?
I can just add on the place. So these are plastic wares. So this is everyday household item.
Household items,
Basically every kitchenware, the plastic
disposables.
plates, everybody uses this at home. At the moment, the duty was 32% as a protection for some of the domestic manufacturers. However, there's a lot of imports that's already coming into Fiji, and consumers have to pay 32% duty on that. So the reason for the reduction in the duty was, one, we have reduced it to 15% to provide some level of protection to the domestic manufacturers, but brought it down to 15% to also provide relief to consumers that are buying imported kitchenware, plastic kitchenware. So these are kitchenware, the plates and the papers and the...
To those using manufacturing wood or importation of wooden kitchenwares, wooden spoons and such.
Yes.
Yes.
Because the country has an issue with littering, so why are we reducing duty?
These are generally not disposable products.
Sorry, sir?
They're generally not disposable products. They're not disposable products. They're not a single-use product. These ones that are being reduced, they're not single-use products.
Plastic plates.
You want to get rid of every plastic item in the country.
I think the other issue too is the quality.
That has been found that the local manufacturers, the quality is different from the ones imported. So that's why it's been allowed to provide some good choices for the people.
Just one more question. El Nino preparedness, warnings have been given by international organizations as well as our Fiji Met Office. What's being done to prepare for that, especially if we have a water shortage situation? El Nino preparedness.
Okay. Yeah, the budget has been prepared at the back of, as he mentioned, the worst case scenario. And however, with some good information, some good vibes happening, we know that we've been alerted with the El Nino issue, and that's where we have to prepare ourselves. Apart from risk mitigation measures that we have, including insurance.
Thank you very much. Before we close this session, I take this opportunity on behalf of the Ministry of Finance to thank the Honourable Minister for Finance for his first budget. This is my 18th budget and 6th as Permanent Secretary for Finance. And I know, especially before an election, for Minister of Finance to hold expenditures at current levels is not an easy task. And assuming a responsibility at this time when the whole world is going through a major crisis, there's a lot of challenges on the fiscal front, there's a lot of challenges on the economy. I think in terms of political support from the Minister, because we are basically technocrats that are guided by political leadership. This is a great balance that we have been able to achieve in a lead up to the elections, and that's why we as technocrats, we said this was a responsible budget looking at these whole things. And I must thank the Minister for the political leadership, guidance and support that was provided to us in preparing this budget. And secondly, every year when we prepare the budget, there's a lot of people behind the scene that spend a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of sacrifice, hard work and pain that people go through. And I take this opportunity to thank all my staff at the Ministry of Finance. As the Minister said earlier, we are a female-dominated ministry, so we have almost 70% of females that work on the budget, and despite all their commitments and they give a lot to the country. And there's a lot of, all the staff from FRCS, there's a big team that's involved, they're sitting here, and many sitting in the offices. They play a very important role in designing the tax policies and the overall budget. And this whole process takes almost 3 months for us to prepare a budget. And there's a lot of work behind the scene that's put in place that unfortunately never comes out. It's just the group that works on the budget. We share this amongst us. And also take this opportunity to thank the Solicitor General's office. There's a lot of legal input that is required to prepare the budget, given the massive legal amendments that has to go through. And the lawyers have also spent a lot of time and hard work to get this budget done. Thank you.